Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about something pretty important, and that is the fact that Donald Trump is probably going to be leading over former Vice President Joe Biden on the electoral map on election night. So if you're watching MSNBC, Fox News, or CNN, if you're watching their coverage of election night 2020 on the 3rd of November, you are probably going to see that Trump is leading over Biden by a pretty large margin. This is just one of the possible scenarios that may occur. Honestly, this is pretty likely to occur. This is just because of the partisan divide between whether you vote by mail or you vote in person. Of course, the Republicans basically most Republicans are not going to vote by mail just because Trump does not like it, and Trump is telling people to go out and vote, and he's even said to go out and vote and then also do a mail-in vote. So he's basically telling people to vote twice, but a lot of Democrats, they do not want to risk their lives or risk getting the COVID-19 just to vote. So a lot of them are going to vote by mail. Almost all of them, most of them. Most Democrats are going to vote by mail, and then most Republicans are going to vote in person. And of course, the mail-in voting has to be counted, while the in-person votes are counted on election night much faster, which is why on election night, most states will go to the president just because the Republican voters, they're all going to come out for him on election night and they are going to vote for him. So states like Texas, Florida, these states might be pretty close, but just because of the lack of Democratic voters coming out for Biden on these states on election night, Donald Trump is probably going to be leading in all of these states. Now, I don't think anyone is going to project that Trump is going to win the election on election night, but I think that there's a very high chance that Trump is going to announce victory basically on election night, just because he will be leading in basically every single state except for the most liberal of states. But he's not going to win the election, in my opinion, if this is what the map looks like. I think that if this were the 2020 electoral map, Biden would still be able to win. And I think that if Biden does come back, I think Trump is definitely going to call it a fraud. And I think there's going to be a lot of problems that occur as a result of this. So, this election, the results might come in, days after the polls close, or even weeks after, even months. So we might not know the results for the election for quite a while. However, looking at this, what's it called? Just this map, I guess. Basically, this is the scenario that I put on the map previously on the screen. Basically, this is how they project that the map will fill in. So as days go by, more states are going to be filled in for Biden, more states are going to be flipping just because of the counting of the mail-in ballots. So as you can see, this is on the 3rd, and then the 4th, you can see more and more states are being filled in for Joe Biden. All of the Northeast will be in the Biden column, Florida as well. And just looking at this just a little bit bigger here, states like Arizona and Nevada, they're all going to flip after election night. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all of the Northeast is very likely to flip. Delaware, states like Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, these are all going to flip after election night just because of the mail-in ballots. Of course, New Mexico as well. But I want to take a look at this CNN map, I guess. Also, this is basically plotting out which states allow mail-in voting. So basically all of these yellow states, as long as you want a mail-in vote, you can, but you have to request for one. While all these green states, they will send the ballot to you, and all you have to do is send it back. So in these yellow states, you have to ask for them. This is basically most of these states. However, basically the most liberal states, in my opinion, are these states that are going to just send a ballot to you no matter what. States like California, Oregon, Washington, Utah is an exception. Nevada is also an exception, I guess, but it's still a pretty liberal state. Colorado is not an exception. It's pretty liberal. New Jersey, very blue. The District of Columbia, the most Democratic state or voting bloc in the election. And then Vermont, of course, is very liberal state. So most of the Democratic states, most of these states that they just send you the ballot by mail are all Democratic states. And then most states are states where you have to request a ballot and they will send it to you, and you just have to send it back to a vote. And then these redder states, these are all of these states where you need an excuse to vote. So you can't just ask for one, you have to provide a reason. I'm not sure if not wanting to get exposed to COVID-19 is a valid reason in these states. It varies depending on the state. These states are the states of Indiana, South Carolina, Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. So some pretty conservative states here. Is basically the trend. Basically, the more liberal it is, the higher chance it has of just sending you the ballot, and the more conservative it is, the higher the chance that you need an excuse. This is just because Trump and many Republicans are saying that this can all lead to fraud. But we must remember that in 2016, 25% of all votes cast, that's around 30 million votes, were all voted by mail. So over 30 million people voted by mail in 2016, and of course it is expected to be a lot higher, but the chances of any fraud occurring are so small that it basically won't affect any results. And so this one last article, which I think is very interesting. You can look at this for yourself. This is on NCSL, and basically you can just take a look at when each state specifically is going to begin its ballot processing and counting. So I think this is a very interesting thing to take a look at. Basically what the processing is they have to verify that you're a real person, I guess, or that you're an adult, or that you're registered to vote. So they basically do like signature comparisons and stuff like that based on the signature on your ballot and the signature on your ID or whatever you registered to vote with. And so the processing, that's just that. Basically, all the processing occurs before Election Day. While the counting, this is what really matters. This is the counting of the votes. So it all varies for states. Everything varies. The processing, how it's processed, or what is processed, all varies per state. But all these explanations do vary, just because a lot of states are very vague about their explanations. Alabama, after polls close on Election Day, so I think that a lot of Alabama might be reporting pretty late on election night. Alaska 8 p.m. on election day. Alaska, I think, might actually be fine. Arizona 14 days before election day. So I think that there's a very high chance that the results in Arizona are going to come out on election night, actually. So on our map there, I think Arizona is going to be projected pretty early. The state of Arkansas 8:30 on election day, 8:30 in the morning. So I think that it's almost definitely going to be, most results are going to be in by election night. But what you can see in basically every single one of these states is if the votes are counted before the poll closing time, they cannot be reported. That is a felony, as you can see right there. So releasing any information earlier than the poll closing time. A lot of them are an hour after the poll closing time. So Colorado 15 days before election day. So I think votes in Colorado are going to come in pretty early. Connecticut, basically whenever they choose, I guess. A lot of states are very vague about how they're going to do this. Delaware, Friday before election day. Not too many people, so I think it's going to be fine. The District of Columbia after polls close, but it's going to go to the Democrats no matter what. So I think DC will actually still be projected for Joe Biden anyways. The state of Florida, 22 days before election day. I think Florida is going, I think they're doing a pretty good job. I think Florida is going to be able to get their results out pretty early. Georgia, 7 a.m. on election day. Georgia, honestly, I think Georgia's going to be called very late, days after election night. Just because Georgia, I think it's going to be close anyways. But I think, with the added mail-in voting counting on election day, I don't think they're going to be able to get all of those votes in. There's around, 10 million people or 11 million people in the state of Georgia, so it's going to take a while. The state of Hawaii, before election day, timing not specified, so very vague. A lot of these states give very vague explanations. State of Idaho after polls close. Illinois, 7 p.m. on election day. You can take a look at all of this for yourself. And Iowa, I think, is pretty interesting. They allow the counting to begin whenever they like, but at a reasonable amount of time to complete all of the counting of the absentee or vote by mail ballots by 10 p.m. on election day, which is the poll closing time in Iowa. So that Iowa results may come in pretty early and on time. State of Kansas, but before election day, but no, the final count, the final tally should not be completed until election day. I think this is good. We should not know, nobody should know all of the results weeks before election or even days before election night. And then you can just look at all this for yourself. I think it's all pretty interesting. And of course, you can check when your state is going to start counting its ballots. But make sure you get in your ballots early. That's very important, because a lot of states, if you get them in after election night, they will not be counting those ballots. the state of Maryland Wednesday after Election Day. So Maryland votes are going to be coming in pretty late. I don't know why they decided to do this, but they're going to be counting all the votes by absentee after Election Day. And Maryland is a pretty liberal state, so a higher percentage of mail-in ballots. I don't know why they're deciding to start counting after election night. State of Massachusetts, also I think that's going to come in pretty late, an hour after the polls close on election day. Michigan, I think Michigan's pretty interesting. Michigan on election day before the polls close at the jurisdiction's discretion. So Michigan, I think, will take a pretty long time. They're processing on election day. So I think that the counting in Michigan, very contentious state, one of the most important states in 2020, that Biden is expected to flip. But I think that if Trump, of course, is leading there, he's going to call fraud if, all the votes come in and they show Biden up after showing Trump up originally. Minnesota, after the polls close on election day, Minnesota also going to be pretty close, I think even closer than Michigan. So I think that's also going to cause a lot of debate there in the state of Minnesota. Mississippi after the polls close, Missouri just on election day. Of course, very vague. Montana, as you can see, Nebraska, Nevada, New Jersey on election day. And then New York after polls close on election day. I don't know why. There's going to be so many mail-in ballots in the state of New York, so I don't know how they're going to get that done. I think the final results, the actual final tally, is going to come out pretty late in the state of New York, but I think that the projection is going to come pretty early, maybe even on election night, just because, it's almost definitely going to go to the Democrats. North Carolina 2 weeks before election day. I think North Carolina is doing a very good job on this, so... Of course, results cannot be announced before the poll closing time. North Dakota after polls close, so really not too important. North Carolina is going to go red. And then Ohio can be scanned prior, but the results may not be disclosed. So, no date in the state of Ohio. Ohio, another very close state. Oklahoma, it's a lot of stuff. And then the state of Oregon, you cannot have the final tally or any tally from any precinct until 8 p.m. on election day. And I'm going to just go down. South Carolina, 9 a.m. on election day. And Texas, I want to take a look at Texas here. When the polls close on election day, and then in a jurisdiction of more than 100,000 people, counting can begin at the end of the early voting period by personal appearance. And so Texas, I don't think that's going to be too big of a problem, just because Texas is not allowing you to just request for one. You have to have a reason as to why you want to vote by mail. So I think that there's not going to be as many. And I think that definitely this could sway the election. I think that Trump might even win the state with a lean margin, or likely margin. I think it's almost definitely out of reach for President Trump, but it might even be a lean margin, just because a lot of people don't want to go through the trouble of having to have a reason and just going through all of that just to get a ballot in the state of Texas. So I think that this voting by mail will actually benefit President Trump. So I really don't know why he is so stirred up about it, but I think that this may benefit him in Texas, because I think that in a typical election, Biden would do much better here in the state of Texas, just because it's harder to get a ballot from a state like Texas. You have to request for one. And so that's basically it. You can take a look at this for yourself. I think this is pretty interesting to read, and just to know, how each state is going to be counting its ballots. So basically, of course, I think that Joe Biden is still going to end up being the winner, but I think that there's going to be a lot of contention as to the legitimacy of the results. If they were to come out really late, if they were to come out weeks or even a couple days after election night, I think Trump would definitely agree with the results that came out on election night. That would almost definitely show him winning. He would basically be winning in most states on election night, just because of the disproportionate ratio between Democrats and Republicans in terms of mail-in voting. So I think this is going to cause a lot of trouble, and I think that a lot of people are going to get into a lot of arguments over this issue, but we'll have to see what happens on election night. We don't know anything for sure right now, but my prediction is that Trump will be leading on election night, but after everything is counted, Biden will be winning the election. So if you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like on this video, as well as subscribing to my channel. Really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for 2,000 subscribers, and I will see you in the next video.